CBS finally breaks NCIS's long-running Gibbs trend at the perfect time. For more than 2 decades, NCIS has thrived on consistency. Its familiar rhythm, case of the week, team banter, and the steady moral compass of Leroy Jethro Gibbs became not just a formula, but a comfort for millions of viewers. Gibbs wasn't just a character, he was the spine of the show, the quiet force holding everything together with a firm gaze, a set of rules, and the occasional head slap. Even after his departure, his presence lingered like an unspoken code of conduct embedded in the DNA of the series. But television, like life, cannot remain static forever. And now, CBS has done something that once seemed almost unthinkable. It has finally broken away from the long-standing Gibbs trend, and surprisingly, it couldn't have come at a better time. For years, even after Gibbs stepped away, the show operated as if he were still in the room. His philosophies guided decisions. His leadership style influenced new characters. His shadow loomed large, shaping how stories unfolded and how conflicts were resolved. In many ways, the show hesitated to move forward, afraid that letting go completely might alienate its loyal fan base. That hesitation was understandable. When a character becomes synonymous with a series, moving beyond them is risky. Fans develop emotional attachments that go beyond storytelling. They become part of routine, memory, even identity. Gibbs represented stability, discipline, and a certain old-school sense of justice that felt increasingly rare in modern television. Yet, the very strength of that legacy eventually became a creative limitation. By holding on to Gibbs' influence for too long, NCIS risked becoming a reflection of its past rather than a story evolving in the present. New characters, no matter how compelling, often felt like they were filling a space rather than creating their own. Leadership dynamics stayed rooted in comparison. Even narrative risks were filtered through the question, would Gibbs do this? Breaking that pattern required more than just writing out a character. It required a philosophical shift. And that's exactly what CBS has now embraced. The recent evolution of NCIS shows a willingness to redefine itself, not by erasing Gibbs, but by finally allowing the series to breathe without constantly referencing him. Leadership is no longer about mimicking his stoic authority. Instead, it's becoming more collaborative, more emotionally open, and more reflective of contemporary storytelling. This shift has brought a noticeable change in tone. The team dynamics feel less hierarchical and more fluid. Characters are given room to make mistakes without the implicit expectation of living up to Gibbs' near-mythical standards. Personal stories are explored with greater nuance, allowing vulnerabilities to surface in ways that would have once been overshadowed by Gibbs' commanding presence. In many ways, the show is rediscovering itself. What makes this transition particularly effective is its timing. After so many seasons, audiences themselves have changed. Viewers today are more receptive to character-driven narratives, emotional complexity, and evolving team structures. The traditional, strong, silent leader archetype, while still respected, is no longer the only model that resonates. By breaking away from the Gibbs trend now, NCIS aligns itself with this broader shift in television storytelling. It acknowledges that legacy is important, but growth is essential. There's also something deeply respectful about the way this change has been handled. Rather than abruptly cutting ties with the past, the show has allowed Gibbs' influence to fade naturally. His absence feels earned, not forced. His legacy remains intact, but it no longer dictates every narrative choice. This balance, honoring the past while embracing the future, is incredibly difficult to achieve, yet NCIS manages it with surprising grace. The result is a series that feels both familiar and refreshed. Longtime fans can still recognize the core elements they love: the investigative structure, the camaraderie, the sense of purpose. But there's also a renewed energy, a sense that anything can happen because the show is no longer bound by an invisible rulebook. Interestingly, this evolution also benefits the newer cast members the most. Without the constant comparison to Gibbs, they are finally stepping into their own identities. Leadership roles feel earned rather than inherited. Conflicts feel more organic. Relationships are developing in ways that reflect the personalities of the current team, not the expectations of a past one. This creative freedom opens doors for storytelling that were previously difficult to explore. Moral dilemmas can be less black and white. Authority can be questioned. Decisions can carry ambiguity. These are the kinds of narrative risks that keep long-running shows alive, preventing them from becoming predictable or stagnant. And perhaps that's the most important takeaway. Breaking the Gibbs trend isn't about replacing him. It's about allowing NCIS to evolve beyond the need for replacement altogether. No character, no matter how iconic, should define the limits of a story forever. True longevity comes from adaptation, from the willingness to change while staying true to the heart of what made the show successful in the first place. CBS seems to understand this now. By choosing this moment to fully step out of Gibbs's shadow, the network is not just preserving the legacy of NCIS, it's ensuring its future. The show is no longer asking whether it can survive without Gibbs. Instead, it's exploring what it can become because of that absence. And the answer, so far, is promising. There's a quiet confidence in the way the series is moving forward now. It doesn't feel like it's trying to prove anything. It's simply telling its stories, trusting its characters, and allowing the audience to grow alongside it. In a television landscape where many long-running shows struggle to reinvent themselves, NCIS has found a way to do so without losing its identity. By finally breaking free from a defining trend at precisely the right time, it has turned what could have been a weakness into its greatest strength. The Gibbs era will always be a foundational chapter in the show's history. But now, NCIS is writing a new one, on its own terms. What makes this new chapter of NCIS especially compelling is not just the absence of Gibbs' dominating presence, but the emergence of a different kind of leadership identity. One that reflects a modern understanding of teamwork. Authority is no longer centered on a single figure who holds all the answers. Instead, it's distributed, shared, and sometimes even contested. This subtle but powerful shift transforms the narrative from a command-driven structure into something far more dynamic. In earlier seasons, conflicts were often resolved through Gibbs' instinct. His gut feeling carried weight, and more often than not, it proved correct. While that certainty gave the show a strong anchor, it also limited unpredictability. Now, without that infallible center, the storytelling has embraced uncertainty in a way that feels fresh. Decisions are debated, outcomes are less predictable, and most importantly, the audience is invited to question alongside the characters rather than simply trust a single authority. This change has also deepened interpersonal relationships within the team, where once interactions revolved around how individuals aligned with Gibbs' expectations. They now evolve organically between characters. Friendships feel less structured. Disagreements carry more emotional weight. Even humor has shifted. It's less about breaking tension under a strict leader and more about genuine personality expression. There's also a noticeable shift in how vulnerability is portrayed. Gibbs, by design, was a closed-off character, shaped by trauma and defined by restraint. His emotional walls were part of his identity, and while they occasionally cracked, they rarely collapsed. In contrast, the current team operates with a greater emotional openness. Characters confront their pasts more directly. They express doubt, fear, and empathy without the need to mask it behind stoicism. This doesn't weaken the show, it strengthens it. In fact, It allows NCIS to explore themes that feel more relevant to today's audience. Mental health, moral ambiguity, and the complexity of human connection are no longer side notes. They are woven into the fabric of the story. Cases are not just puzzles to be solved, they are catalysts for character growth. Another important aspect of breaking the Gibbs trend is how it reshapes the concept of legacy itself. For a long time, legacy in NCIS meant continuity, preserving the methods, values, and structure established by Gibbs. But now, legacy is being redefined as evolution. It's no longer about maintaining the exact same system, but about building upon it in ways that reflect change. This is a crucial distinction. By allowing the team to reinterpret what it means to uphold Gibbs's values, the show avoids the trap of imitation. Respect for the past does not require replication. Instead, it invites adaptation. Characters can honor what came before while still forging their own paths, and that balance is what gives the series its renewed sense of purpose. Interestingly, this transition also reframes how audiences view Gibbs himself. With some distance from his constant presence, his character feels even more iconic. His influence is no longer overstated, it's implied. And in that subtlety, it gains strength. Viewers remember him not as a limitation on the current story, but as a defining figure in the show's history. Absence, in this case, has amplified appreciation. At the same time, the show is careful not to rely on nostalgia as a crutch. While callbacks and references still exist, they are used sparingly. The focus remains firmly on the present. This discipline is what separates a successful evolution from a desperate attempt to hold on to past glory. And the audience seems to recognize that. There's a growing sense that NCIS is no longer trying to recreate what it once was. Instead, it's embracing what it can be now. That confidence is reflected in the pacing, the dialogue, and the risks the writers are willing to take. Episodes feel less formulaic. Character arcs feel less constrained. Even the structure of cases has begun to shift, occasionally breaking away from the traditional start-to-finish procedural format. These changes may seem subtle on the surface, but collectively, they signal a deeper transformation. Of course, not every fan will embrace this new direction immediately. Change, especially in a long-running series, can be uncomfortable. Some viewers will always prefer the familiarity of the Gibbs era, the certainty, the discipline, the iconic leadership style. And that preference is valid. But what makes NCIS's current evolution so effective is that it doesn't attempt to erase that past. It simply chooses not to be defined by it anymore. That distinction is key to its success. In many ways, the show is doing what its characters are now learning to do. Move forward without forgetting where they came from. It's a narrative parallel that adds an extra layer of meaning to the viewing experience. The growth happening on screen mirrors the growth of the series itself. Looking ahead, this creative freedom opens up exciting possibilities. New types of cases, deeper character exploration, and even unexpected leadership shifts can now occur without feeling out of place. The show is no longer bound by an invisible template. It has room to surprise. And after so many seasons, surprise is exactly what keeps a series alive. Ultimately, CBS's decision to finally break away from the long-running Gibbs trend is not just a bold move, it's a necessary one. It acknowledges that even the strongest foundations must evolve to remain relevant. It trusts the audience to embrace change. And most importantly, it gives NCIS the opportunity to continue growing rather than simply enduring. Because longevity alone is not enough. A show can run for decades, but without evolution, it risks becoming a relic of its former self. NCIS has avoided that fate, not by abandoning its identity, but by expanding it. The Gibbs era may have defined the show, but this new era is redefining what it means to last.